If you believe in science, you know that humanity came to be through the process of evolution over many millennia. The form our bodies take today are a direct result of the environments and predators that our ancestors endured. What would happen then if this evolutionary process were to be accelerated? What would become of our greed-filled, spirit-inhabited flesh? In 1998, Squaresoft attempted to examine this theme in their quasi-novel sequel, Parasite Eve, for the Sony PlayStation. Set in New York City, the game takes place over a 6-day period in December of 1997. We play as Aya Brea, a young enigmatic policewoman who has patchy memories regarding elements of her past. The game opens on a typical chilly pre-Christmas Manhattan evening, spending a night at the opera with her lackluster date. As a theatre graduate, this introduction to the game really excited me, recalling my experience with Final Fantasy IX, whose beginning also centered around the performing arts. Where I would be beside myself to be spending an evening in Carnegie Hall, Aya just seems to be bored. That is, until the typical performance soon gives way to cinders and sparks, as both actors and audience members alike begin to self-combust, almost as though they are being immolated by someone or something. All the while, the soprano continues to sing, unfazed by the embered chaos. Were Aya just an average Jane, she too would have been roasted alive. However, her body appears to be unscathed, and as a keeper of the peace, despite not being on duty, she unholsters her handgun and confronts the woman in red up on the stage. It's here that we're introduced to the battle system. Where other contemporaries of the JRPG genre at the time tended to favour turn-based or semi-turn-based battles, Parasite Eve opts for something altogether different. During battle, you have complete control of Aya, able to run around the battlefield to avoid attacks. All the while, an active time battle or ATB gorge will fill. When it reaches its apex, you can then choose to shoot the enemy or open the menu to use items or spells which Aya will later acquire. I found this to be a refreshing change of pace from all the other games of the same epoch that chose the safer route rather than that of evolution. Before Aya can put the woman, who calls herself Eve, out of her misery, Eve escapes to the corridors beneath the stage. Pursuing her, Aya comes face to face with animals that are being transmogrified until they are beyond recognition. These aberrations attack Aya, forcing her to use not only her firearm, but also her newfound powers to survive. Finally tracking down Eve in the rehearsal room, she discovers that the cause of the mutations, and her own power, is mitochondria, the power source of a cell's nuclei. Eve claims that the mitochondria has awakened, and after many millennia of living harmoniously within all living cells, the time has come for them to liberate themselves and create a new future. Before Aya can stop her, Eve flees once more through the sewers beneath Carnegie Hall, thus commencing Aya's pursuit of her over the next 6 days. One thing I do want to contest is the genre by which this game is commonly identified. Parasite Eve functions as a horror RPG with a sci-fi setting, though cannot be contained to this classification. To claim the game is horror would be a misdemeanor when compared to such titles as Clock Tower or Resident Evil, which not only oozed the atmosphere of the horror movement through their framing, but also in the jump scares that they provided. Parasite Eve is scary only in the sense that the enemies Aya faces are anomalies, animals that are being grotesquely modified to hinder her progress. At no point in the game did I ever feel unsettled or scared. And whilst the theories of the game's narrative are steeped in science, hence the sci-fi tag, science cannot explain how a rat can shoot fireballs from its forked tail, nor a woman conjure green laser beams from the palm of her hands. However, despite my contentions, I did enjoy the game for what it was. I must also pay tribute to the individual who created the game's initial concept, Japanese pharmacologist and author Hideaki Sena. First published in 1995, the book was later adapted into a film in 1997. Following this, we received the game I am reviewing now in 1998. The initial concept of the Parasite Eve novelization was set in Japan, where Eve first awakened in a woman called Kiyomi Nagashima. Nagashima is involved in a car accident, which renders her brain dead and causes one of her kidneys to be transplanted into a teenage girl. Does this sound familiar? Without making this review about the novel, in brief, Eventually, this Eve wrests control of the girl and decides to create the ultimate being by usurping sperm from an unwilling live donor and fertilizing a child within herself. However, because male sperm is said to carry a male form of mitochondria, this resulted in the baby's body becoming a battlefield for the warring power cells. Eventually, the child dies as neither mitochondria comes out dominant, stopping everything there. Only it didn't, because now it's found its way to New York. I enjoyed that the game often paid homage to its roots and didn't stray too far from the source material that assisted to create it. As Aya continues to use her newfound power, her parasite energy, or PE, provided by her own mitochondria, will evolve in the form of providing new abilities to use within combat. Just like the ATB Gorge, the PE Gorge will also climb during battle, though the more you use Aya's latent abilities in a single battle, the slower this gorge will replenish for that battle until it becomes non-conventional to rely on at all. I typically tended to find that Aya's bullets were much more useful from an offensive perspective than any of the other abilities she learns, with the exception of her final ability that is a must for making the final boss battle gauntlet bearable. Aya learns PE abilities through leveling up after battle, which was a little disappointing considering how the game tackles the overall battle system. In comparison, the lack of flexibility in Aya's development was very disappointing. Whilst you do not have direct control over Aya's development, you can modify the weapons that she uses, which in turn can make or break you in battle. As a police officer, Aya's weapon of choice is typically a firearm, though she can technically use some physical weapons. As you explore different areas, you'll acquire various weapons that Aya can utilize to make her life easier. Some weapons have abilities attached to them, such as putting the enemy to sleep, or giving you more bullets per turn. I would caution that more bullets aren't necessarily a good thing though. I found that a gun using 5 shots in one turn fractioned the overall damage, rather than providing real firepower. These weapon abilities can be transferred between arms using an item called a tool. Tools are a common enough item found throughout Aya's adventure, so it pays to transfer abilities that you find are working well for you. This also goes for defensive equipment too. For example, the auto heal ability was a lifesaver. Aya may be the only one immune to the combusting effect of being close to Eve, but that doesn't mean that she's on this mission alone. Her police partner Daniel often escorts her between the locations of New York City in his vehicle. Additionally, a scientist from Japan who casually links the narrative to the novelization makes an appearance, providing Aya with not only advice, but also novelty charms to protect her from the various foes that she will face. Speaking overall on the characters in this game, I would like to note that I felt that it was a positive that the protagonist Aya is a woman. During the time this game came out initially, it wasn't a common occurrence to see women featured in such prominent positions, though this seems to be something that Squaresoft, later Square Enix, was good at doing. Additionally, I enjoyed that Aya's major support cast were from minority groups. Daniel is a black man who could have easily been white but wasn't. I enjoyed their relationship in an almost brotherly sisterly way. There are many times that Daniel sticks his neck out for Aya, and vice versa. Additionally, Maeda is Japanese, serving another minority that wasn't commonly explored at the time the game was initially released. I enjoyed seeing his culture displayed through his mannerisms and the gesture of giving prayer charms to Aya. I also found it interesting that xenophobia was briefly explored when a police officer talks bad Japanese at him, despite the fact that Maeda often uses language that you'd find within an academic dissertation. As for Aya herself, I enjoyed her characterization a lot. She is a woman who, whilst a little confused by what is happening to her and to New York City, never falters from the course she is following. Whilst there are times that she does question whether or not she too is a monster, she has a great sense of justice in not only upholding her duty to the citizens of New York, but also protecting her friends. Over the course of the 6 days, Aya will often find herself back at her local police station, and because I am me, I enjoyed going around talking to all of the NPCs to learn more about them and their relation to Aya. Every Friday is Arseless Chaps Day, a tradition which Nyx wholeheartedly embraces, because you know it's fun at the YMCA! When exploring New York City, Aya will often come into situations where she must battle neo-mitochondrial creatures, organisms that have been modified by Eve's mitochondria. These encounters are triggered by walking over a certain area on the field screen, and it's generally always in the exact same spot. When crossing this threshold, there is a chance that sometimes the battles won't be triggered. If it is, you'll hear Aya's heartbeat for a moment, and then the screen will flash monochrome before loading in the enemies on the same screen. In concept, these battles were interesting due to the ability to tackle them live. However, most encounters place Aya in small areas, which makes dodging the enemy difficult. Her pace when in an encounter, as well as on the field, is as glacial as her heart on her date at Carnegie Hall. If you don't already know how to anticipate an enemy's attack, you'll be copying a lashing tongue to the face, or a fireball to the arse. I would have liked to have seen an option to dodge enemy attacks better, like a dodge roll. I mean, she is a cop, isn't she? She should have field combat training. Whilst I was playing, I thought I would love to see an evolution of this battle system in a current generation game. Then I realised that we already have it. If you've played Final Fantasy VII Remake, then you've basically experienced the Parasite Eve battle system, albeit in its next stage of evolution. During Aya's pursuit of Eve, she will visit various national icons of the New York City landscape, such as the Natural Museum of History and Central Park. Whilst traversing these locations, Aya can find chests that contain items beneficial to her quest. There are two issues that I have with this. The first is that most of the game's narrative takes place in the evening. Due to this, it can sometimes be difficult to see these chests because they are painted grey. Though if they appear on the same screen as a battle, when the battle transition occurs you can glimpse them. But remembering to go and get them after battle is another issue. The other problem I have with this game is the inventory system. Aya's inventory is limited by her level. She gains more slots as she levels up, but it still never seemed that she had enough space. Items don't stack, so for example each individual medicine you carry will occupy their own slot in her limited inventory. You can transfer a single item into an empty chest in the field, but I never felt that there was a point to this. When would I ever come back to collect it? You can store unnecessary items in bulk at the police station, but this is also an arduous process because you need to click each item and then scroll to a free space within the chest. I would have loved to see an easy dump option so that less time was spent on sorting items. Also, you can only sort your inventory automatically when you're in the process of storing items. Outside of this, you have to manually arrange it. Why? As was typical for the time, Squaresoft designed this game with pre-rendered 3D backgrounds overlaid with 3D characters. I thought it worked well and enjoyed visiting the various areas of New York City that they had lovingly crafted. Parasite Eve is described as being a cinematic experience by the developers due to the number of 3D cutscenes that the game contains. I wouldn't really say that they exist in a higher quantity compared to the PlayStation era Final Fantasy titles, but I also don't feel the need to complain about them because they were all great and suited the mood of the setting. For example, though I claim this game isn't horror, it was still grotesque seeing a German Shepherd's ears fall off, rapidly barking as its face splits apart. The soundtrack was composed by Yoko Shimomura, who you would most likely recognise as the main composer of all the Kingdom Hearts games. I enjoyed her approach to composing for Parasite Eve. Many of the tracks evolved from the opera scene at the start of the game, containing Eve singing. Other times, the themes match the theatrics of a theatre performance, using a piano as the main motive. My favourite track is simply called You Be. It begins as a chanting Celtic chorus that sounds almost alien in nature, as though heralding in the birth of a deity that will soon usher in the destruction of the world. The track changes to a faster-paced frenetic frenzy, with church organs representative of Aya's battle with the monstrosity birthed from Eve's womb, as we wrestle against adversity to prevent it from evolving and crawling out to all the mitochondria of the world, effectively transmogrifying them. Parasite Eve is a unique game that I am glad that I finally got the opportunity to play. As a theatre graduate, I enjoyed that the game commenced in an opera and led around places in New York that I would love to visit myself, though definitely not under the same situation of duress. The semi-active battle system made the game stand apart from other titles in the same era, which gives it a leg up in the evolutionary chain. Whilst two sequels did spawn from this game's kidney cells, both are radically different to their predecessor, the second being more akin to a survival horror, and the third being something that people just do not want to even mention exists. If you've not played the first Parasite Eve game, it is short and took me around 8 hours to complete. If you have some spare time up your sleeve, then I would recommend you try it out for yourself. By the way, are there any games that you've played that people claim are one genre but then when you play it you find that's not really the case? Let me know in the comments. This has been Venoir with a review of Parasite Eve for the Sony PlayStation. If you've enjoyed this review, feel free to like or subscribe as it helps me out a bunch. As always, thanks for taking the time to check out this video, and I hope to see you all again next time. Take care of yourselves, and bye bye for now.
Just give you a minute.